Jake Morrison walked through the long hallway that led to the Galactic Council chamber. His boots made soft sounds on the smooth metal floor. He carried a datapad in his left hand and wore the blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. Today would be different from all the other days he had spoken to the council. Today he would give them news they did not expect. The chamber doors opened with a quiet hiss. Jake stepped inside and looked up at the massive room. Hundreds of alien beings sat in curved rows that went up to the ceiling. Each species had their own section. The Vorthans glowed with soft blue light from their crystal bodies. The Zephyrians had long, thin heads and moved like dancers. The Nethrae floated in clear tanks filled with green gas. The insect-like Cricks clicked their claws on their armrests. Jake walked to the center platform. A beam of light shone down on him from above. Every eye in the chamber watched him. Some aliens whispered to each other in languages that sounded like music or wind or grinding stones. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Jake began. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's sound system. I come before you today to present Earth's final contribution report. He touched his datapad and holographic images appeared. In the air around him, the first image showed a star map with hundreds of systems marked in green. Over the past 100 years, human engineers have improved faster than light travel by 40%. This allowed the Council to expand into new regions of space. Murmurs rose from the alien observers. Jake continued. Human doctors created medicines that saved over 8 billion lives across 67 different species. The cure for Red Death came from our labs. The treatment for quantum fever was developed by Dr. Susan Hill on Earth. More images appeared. Ships in battle, planets being terraformed, cities rising on dead worlds. Human military forces defended Council space in the Kree War, the Void Hunter attacks, and the rebellion of the Outer Rim. We lost 2 million soldiers protecting worlds we had never seen. Ambassador Vex of the Vorthans stood up in his section. His crystal body flashed brighter. Commander Morrison, we have heard these claims many times. Your species takes credit for discoveries that any civilized race would have made eventually. Jake looked up at the Vorthan. With respect, Ambassador, we are not claiming credit. We are stating facts. Facts, said Counselor Zara of the Zephyrians. She moved her long neck in what humans had learned was their version of laughter. Humans call their crude experiments facts. You stumble around in laboratories like children playing with dangerous toys. The Crick's representative made clicking sounds that the translator turned into words. Emotional beings cannot do real science. They let feelings cloud their judgment. This is why human methods are unreliable. Jake felt heat rise in his chest, but kept his voice calm. Our methods may seem different, but they work. The quantum communicators you use to talk across the galaxy came from human research. The shield generators protecting your home worlds were built by human hands. Copied from superior alien designs, said the Nethrae speaker. Its voice bubbled through the gas in its tank. Humans are good at copying. They are not good at creating. Other council members voiced their agreement. Jake had heard these words before in smaller meetings. Today they came from the full assembly. He looked around the chamber and saw the same expression on every alien face. Disgust, impatience, the look adults gave to children who would not stop asking questions. The council has made a decision, announced President Terran from his high platform. The elderly Altarian's skin had turned the deep purple that showed his serious mood. Humanity's voting rights in this council are hereby removed. Human colonies will be limited to the Terra sector. Human military units will be disbanded and replaced with proper council forces. Jake felt the words hit him like cold water. He had known this might happen, but hearing it still shocked him. President Toran, may I ask the reasoning behind this? Decision? Human influence has become a problem, Turan replied. Your people ignore proper procedures. They question authority. They make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. The Council has determined that humanity is holding back galactic progress. We request that Earth accept its new status with grace, added Ambassador Vex. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when humans have evolved beyond their primitive ways, you might earn a voice in galactic affairs again. Jake looked around the chamber one more time. He saw beings from 100 worlds, species that had worked beside humans for generations. Not one spoke in humanity's defense. Not one questioned the Council's decision. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. With the press of a button, he activated a holographic recorder. His own image appeared next to him, speaking words he had memorized. To the Galactic Council, his recorded voice said, Earth has received your decision to strip humanity of its rights and status. We have considered your position carefully. In response, the United Earth Government formally withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. Shocked silence filled the chamber. Then voices rose in dozens of languages, all asking the same question. What did this mean? Jake's recorded image continued. All human personnel will be recalled from Council facilities within 1 standard year. All human colonies and installations will be evacuated. All technology transfers and research partnerships are terminated. Earth wishes the Council well in its future endeavors. The recording ended. Jake put the device back in his pocket and looked up at President Turan. The withdrawal begins tomorrow. Good day, honored Council members. He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, aliens shouted questions and demands. Some called for him to stop. Others insisted that Earth could not simply leave. A few laughed and said good riddance to the troublesome humans. Jake did not look back. The chamber doors closed behind him with the same quiet hiss they had made. When he entered, the hallway seemed longer now as he walked back toward the docking bay, where his ship waited. In his pocket, his communicator buzzed with an encrypted message from Earth. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice was calm and professional. Jake, the fleet is ready. Dr. Lisa Carter says the preparations are complete. We'll be ready to leave when you give the word. Jake touched the reply button. Give the word, Kate. It's time to go home. As he reached his ship, Jake looked back at the Council building one last time. Somewhere inside, hundreds of alien beings were probably still arguing about what humans thought they could accomplish on their own. Soon they would find out. The stars were waiting, and humanity had work to do. Captain Ben Harper stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Horizon and watched the stars move past the view screen. Behind his ship, 300 other human vessels traveled together in the largest exodus the galaxy had ever seen. Each ship carried families, equipment, and everything humanity had built in their time among the stars. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Navigation Officer Lisa Park plotted their course through empty space beyond the galactic rim. Communications Specialist Ryan Torres monitored messages from the other ships in the fleet. Engineer Paula Martinez kept watch on the massive engines that pushed their home toward unknown regions. Ben touched a button on his command chair. Admiral Sullivan, this is New Horizon. All ships are maintaining formation. No problems to report. Kate Sullivan's voice came through clearly from her flagship. Earth's promise. Good work, Ben. We're making better time than expected. At this rate, we'll reach the target zone in 6 months. 6 months to travel farther than any human had gone before. Ben looked at the star charts on his screen. They showed the edge of known space growing smaller behind them. Ahead lay darkness and possibility. Dr. Alex Rivera walked onto the bridge carrying a data pad. He was the fleet's chief science officer and had spent 2 years planning this journey. Captain, I wanted to show you the latest reports from our scout ships. The sensor data looks promising. Ben took the pad and studied the readings. 3 light years ahead, their advanced scouts had found something remarkable. A cluster of star systems with dozens of worlds suitable for human life. No alien civilizations. No claims by the Galactic Council. Just empty planets waiting for new inhabitants. How many people can we settle in that region? Ben asked. Alex smiled. All of them. The preliminary scans show at least 40 worlds that could support large populations. Some will need terraforming, but we have the technology. Ben nodded and handed back the data pad. Humanity had learned much about changing dead worlds into living ones during their time with the Council. Now that knowledge would serve them in building their own civilization. On the lower decks, families went about their daily lives. Children attended school in converted cargo bays. Adults worked in hydroponics gardens that provided fresh food. For the journey, elderly people shared stories of Earth and the colonies they have left behind. Maria Santos stood in one of the agricultural sections, checking on the seed banks they carried. Each ship held samples of every crop humanity had developed. Wheat from Earth, fruit trees from the Alpha Centauri colonies, vegetables that had been modified to grow on alien worlds. When they reached their new home, they would plant gardens that remembered 100 different suns. Dr. Santos called Jamie Chun from across the growing area. He was one of her assistants, a young man who had volunteered to leave his job on Mars to join the Exodus. The grain samples from Kepler 442 are showing excellent growth rates. We should have enough seed stock to plant 3 continents when we arrive. Maria smiled as she made notes on her tablet. The Council had always criticized human agricultural methods as too unpredictable. They preferred sterile growing chambers and artificial nutrients. Humans grew food in soil that teemed with life, using techniques that seemed like magic to other species. 3 decks above, Captain Jennifer Hayes commanded the industrial ship Mountain Forge. Her vessel carried the factories and equipment needed to build a new civilization. Automated construction systems that could raise cities in months. Mining robots that could strip valuable metals from asteroids. Fusion reactors that would power human settlements for centuries. Captain Hayes, her engineering chief Tony Clark, reported, "We finished the inventory of manufacturing equipment. Everything survived the departure in good condition. We'll be able to start building as soon as we choose our first colony site." Jennifer looked out at the fleet around them. Each ship had a specific purpose. Some carried people and supplies. Others held the machines of industry. A few transported the most precious cargo of all, the accumulated knowledge of human civilization, stored in quantum computers. The Council had expected humans to beg for mercy after losing their privileges. Instead, they had found something that surprised their alien neighbors: unity. Every human colony had voted to join the Exodus. Every human scientist had agreed to share their research freely. Every human soldier had chosen to protect the fleet rather than serve alien masters. Dr. Nick Taylor worked in the medical bay of the research vessel Hope's Light. Around him, other doctors and scientists continued experiments that the Council had deemed unimportant. Human medicine focused on healing rather than just treating symptoms. Human research looked for connections that pure logic might miss. "The biological samples are stable," Nick reported to his team. "We've preserved everything from Earth's ecosystem and samples from every world humans have visited. When we establish our new colonies, we'll be able to recreate the environments we left behind." His assistant, Dr. Rachel Coleman, smiled as she checked on cultures growing in biotanks. "The Council always said our methods were too messy and unpredictable. But we've cured diseases they couldn't even understand." Nick nodded. Human doctors had saved billions of alien lives using techniques that seemed chaotic to other species. They combined chemistry with intuition, following hunches that led to breakthroughs. The Council's medical establishment had been built on rigid protocols that left no room for creative thinking. Admiral Kate Sullivan walked through the corridors of her flagship, visiting different sections of the ship. In the tactical center, Colonel Gary Peterson and his staff planned the defense of their new territory. In the communications room, operators maintained contact with human settlements throughout the galaxy, coordinating the final evacuations. Kate stopped at an observation deck and looked out at the fleet. Hundreds of ships carrying millions of people toward an uncertain future. The Council had thought humans would collapse without alien guidance. Instead, they had revealed hidden strengths that had been building for generations. Every human ship carried the same message recorded by Jake Morrison and broadcast throughout the galaxy. Humanity thanks the Galactic Council for the opportunity to serve. We part with no anger, only sadness that our differences could not be resolved. May you find the peace and prosperity you seek. The message had been sent to every world, every station, every alien government. Some had responded with relief, glad to see the troublesome humans gone. Others had sent private communications expressing regret. A few alien scientists had even asked to join the exodus, but human leaders had politely declined. Ben Harper returned his attention to the bridge as they prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. The next phase of their journey would take them beyond the reach of Council sensors. After that, they would truly be on their own. All ships report ready for jump, Lisa Park announced. Ben sat forward in his command chair. Execute jump. Take U.S. home. The stars stretched into lines of light as the human fleet disappeared into the vast darkness between galaxies, carrying with them the seeds of a new civilization. Counselor Vex of the Vorthans stared at the failing holographic display in the Tau Ceti Defense Center. Red warning lights flashed across the control panels while alien technicians worked frantically at their stations. The automated defense grid that protected 3 billion lives had been offline for 6 days, and nobody could fix it. Status report, Vex demanded, his crystal body flickering with frustrated energy. Chief Engineer Malik of the Zephyrians turned from his console with defeat written across his elongated features. The quantum resonators refused to synchronize. We have followed every procedure in the technical manuals, but the system will not respond. Vex moved closer to examine the readings. The defense grid had been installed 15 years ago by a human engineering team led by Lieutenant Commander Steve Peterson. It had worked perfectly until 2 months after the human exodus ended. Now the sophisticated network of satellites and energy projectors sat dead in space. What would the human Peterson have done differently? Vex asked, though the question felt like admitting failure. Malik's neck swayed in confusion. The manuals contain all the necessary information. There should be no difference between human methods and proper procedures. But there was a difference, and Vex knew it. He had watched Steve Peterson work on similar systems many times. The human never followed the manuals exactly. He would pause, listen to sounds the machines made, touch panels with his bare hands to feel vibrations. Peterson called it getting a sense of the system's mood, which had seemed ridiculous to logical minds. Now, with raiders from the outer rim moving toward Tau Ceti, that ridiculous human intuition was exactly what they needed. On the agricultural world of Kepler 438c, Administrator Yorn faced his own crisis. The atmospheric processors that had transformed a poisonous wasteland into fertile farmland were failing. Crops withered in fields that had fed 40 million people. The carefully balanced ecosystem that Dr. Amy Watson had created was collapsing. Yorn stood in what had once been a thriving wheat field and watched the plants turn brown and die. The Zephyrian scientists he had brought to replace Watson worked day and night, but they could not understand what was going wrong. Dr. Kess, the lead replacement scientist approached with her latest test results. The atmospheric composition matches all the specifications in Watson's records. The soil chemistry is within acceptable parameters. The irrigation systems function normally, yet the ecosystem continues to deteriorate. Yorn took the data pad and studied the numbers. Everything looked correct according to the scientific measurements, but the evidence of failure surrounded them. Dead plants stretched to the horizon under a sky that should have supported abundant life. What modifications did Watson make to the system? Yorn asked. None that were recorded, Kess replied. The official reports show she followed standard terraforming protocols. But Yorn remembered visiting this world when Watson was alive. He had watched her walk through the fields, touching soil with her bare hands, smelling the air, observing how insects moved among the plants. She made tiny adjustments that were never written down, changes that came from understanding how living systems actually worked rather than how they were supposed to work. The Zephyrians had all the data, but none of the wisdom. They knew the numbers, but not the music that the numbers made when they worked together. In the medical centers of 17 worlds, doctors faced their worst nightmare. The Andromedan plague had returned in a new form that resisted every treatment. The cure developed by Dr. Nick Taylor 3 years ago no longer worked against the mutated strain. Dr. Hess of the Crix examined tissue samples under her most powerful microscope. The plague organisms had changed in ways that defied prediction. They adapted faster than traditional research methods could track them. Have you analyzed Taylor's research notes? Asked her assistant. Repeatedly, Hess clicked in frustration. His methods make no sense. He combined treatments that should not work together. He tested theories that had no logical foundation. Yet somehow he succeeded where our best scientists failed. The notes were filled with human intuition and guesswork. Taylor had tried combinations of medicines based on hunches rather than systematic testing. He had looked for patterns that existed only in his imagination. His approach violated every principle of proper scientific method, but his approach had worked, and now people were dying because no one could replicate his irrational success. Chief Maintenance Officer Grix of the Nethray floated in his gas-filled tank aboard the Deep Space Station Harmony 7. Around him, his team struggled to repair critical systems that were failing throughout Council space. Ships broke down faster than they could be fixed. Space stations lost power and life support. The infrastructure of galactic civilization was crumbling. The humans left detailed maintenance manuals. Grix bubbled to his crew. Every procedure is documented. Every component is cataloged. Why can we not maintain their equipment? Technician Brell, a young Crix who had trained under human engineers, made clicking sounds of frustration. The manuals show what to do, but not when to do it. The humans seemed to know which parts would fail before the diagnostic systems detected problems. Grix had noticed the same thing during joint operations with human crews. A human engineer would replace a component that tested as functional, claiming it felt wrong. Days later, similar components would fail throughout the fleet. Human maintenance teams prevented problems rather than just fixing them after they occurred. Preventive maintenance is a standard procedure, Grix pointed out, but not the way humans did it, Brell replied. They maintained systems based on experience and instinct. They fixed things that might break rather than things that had broken. The difference seemed small but proved enormous. Council maintenance teams followed schedules and responded to alerts. Human teams had followed their understanding of how machines aged and deteriorated under different conditions. That understanding could not be learned from manuals. President Turan called an emergency session of the Inner Council. The ruling body of 12 species met in private to discuss problems that were spreading across their territory. Defense grids failed, agricultural worlds produced less food, medical crises went unsolved, and critical infrastructure broke down faster than it could be repaired. "The pattern is clear," Turan announced to the assembled leaders. "Systems designed or maintained by humans are failing without human oversight." Ambassador Vex reluctantly agreed. "Our engineers are competent, but they lack something the humans possessed: an intuitive understanding of complex systems." "Intuition is not scientific," objected Counselor Zara. "We cannot base galactic infrastructure on emotional guesswork." "Yet that emotional guesswork kept our civilization running smoothly for a century," Turan replied. "Now we see what happens without it." The Inner Council faced a terrible realization. They had dismissed human methods as primitive and unreliable, but those methods had been the invisible foundation that held their advanced civilization together. Without human engineers, doctors, and technicians, the Council's perfect systems were revealing their hidden flaws. Outside the Council chambers, the galaxy continued its slow decline toward chaos. On 1,000 worlds, the absence of human innovation was felt in failing machines, dying crops, and spreading disease. The Council had wanted to advance beyond humanity's limitations, but instead they had discovered how much they depended on human strengths they had never recognized or understood. The first cracks in galactic civilization were spreading, and there was no one left who knew how to repair them. President Turan stood in the Council's war room and watched red markers spread across the galactic map like a disease. 5 years had passed since humanity's departure, and the civilization they had left behind was collapsing faster than anyone had imagined possible. The latest crisis reports covered his desk in a sea of failure and desperation. Commander Yex of the Vorthan Fleet approached with the morning's intelligence briefing. His crystal body had lost much of its natural glow, dimmed by months of defeats and retreating battles. "The Void Hunters have taken the Kepler system. That brings their total conquest to 47 star systems in the past 6 months." Turan studied the tactical display showing enemy movements. The Void Hunters were extragalactic predators who had invaded Council space twice before, and both times they had been defeated by human military strategies. Now they had returned for a third assault, and the Council's combined fleets were powerless to stop them. "What is the status of Admiral Kren's task force?" Turan asked. "Destroyed," Yex replied quietly. "The enemy used the same adaptive tactics. That defeated our forces at Proxima and Vega. Our standard battle formations are useless against their methods." Turan remembered the previous Void Hunter wars. Colonel Tony Mitchell had led the defense using strategies that seemed chaotic to traditional military minds. He split his forces into small groups that attacked from unexpected directions. He used civilian ships as decoys and cargo vessels as weapons platforms. His tactics violated every principle taught in Council military academies, but Mitchell's unconventional approach had worked. The Void Hunters could adapt to standard military doctrine, but they struggled against human creativity and unpredictability. Now, with Mitchell and his officers gone, the Council fleets fought by the book and died according to schedule. Dr. Hess clicked her mandibles in frustration as she reviewed the latest casualty reports from the medical crisis spreading through 17 systems. The mutated Andromedan plague had killed over 2 billion beings in the past year, and her research teams were no closer to finding a cure than they had been when the outbreak began. "The organism continues to evolve faster than we can develop treatments," she reported to the Medical Council. "Every time we create a potential cure, the plague adapts within days to resist it." Dr. Yan of the Zephyrians swayed his long neck in despair. Nick Taylor's original research methods remain incomprehensible. He seemed to predict how the plague would evolve before it actually changed. Hess had studied Taylor's work for months, trying to understand his approach to medical research. The human doctor had treated diseases like living opponents in a chess game, anticipating their moves and preparing counter-strategies in advance. He combined treatments in ways that seemed random, but created complex interactions the diseases could not easily overcome. His methods were unscientific, insisted Dr. Vorth of the Nethray. He based his research on intuition and emotion rather than proper analysis. Yet his unscientific methods saved billions of lives, Hess replied. Our scientific methods are allowing billions to die. The medical teams had all the same equipment Taylor had used. They had access to his research notes and laboratory records. They understood the chemistry and biology involved in his treatments. But they could not replicate the intuitive leaps that had made his work successful. Chief Engineer Malek stood in the Quantum Communications Center on the Capital World and watched. Technician after technician failed to repair the network that connected the galaxy. The system that Ryan Clark had designed was failing in cascading waves, cutting off entire sectors from Central Command just when coordination was most desperately needed. The backup systems are activating as designed, reported his assistant. But they cannot handle the full communications load. We are losing contact with outer colonies at a rate of 12 systems per day. Malik examined Clark's original blueprints for the 100th time. The human engineer had built redundancies into the network that seemed excessive and wasteful. Multiple backup pathways, alternative routing protocols, and emergency systems that activated under conditions that rarely occurred. Now, those seemingly wasteful redundancies were the only things preventing complete communications collapse. Clark had designed the network to fail gracefully, maintaining partial function even when major components stopped working. But without his constant adjustments and improvements, even the backup systems were beginning to break down. He knew this would happen, Malek realized. Clark designed the network expecting that someday it would have to function without human maintenance. The realization was both impressive and terrifying. Human engineers had not just built systems that worked well. They had built systems that could survive the absence of their creators. At least for a while, Administrator Yorn received the evacuation orders for Kepler 438c with a mixture of relief and shame. The agricultural world that had once fed 40 million people could no longer support even a fraction of that population. The carefully balanced ecosystem created by Amy Watson was dying, and nothing the replacement scientists tried could save it. The evacuation ships arrived to find the world returning to the poisonous wasteland it had been before human terraforming. Crops rotted in fields that had once produced abundant harvests. The atmospheric processors that had maintained the delicate balance of gases necessary for life were shutting down one by one. Dr. Kess made her final report as the last transport prepared to leave. We have identified 17 different factors that Watson adjusted on a regular basis. Temperature variations, humidity levels, soil mineral content, atmospheric pressure, and bacterial populations in the soil. Each adjustment was small, but together they maintained the ecosystem's health. Why did she not document these procedures? Yorn asked. Because she did not think of them as procedures, Kess replied. She saw the world as a living system and made adjustments based on how it felt rather than what measurements showed. We have the measurements, but not the feelings. The transport lifted off from a world that was already beginning to smell of death. Within months, Kepler 438c would be uninhabitable again. 40 million people would need new homes that the Council did not have. President Terang called an emergency session of the full Council for the first time since humanity's departure. The vast chamber filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds, all facing the same impossible situation. Their civilization was collapsing, their military was defeated, their infrastructure was failing, and their people were dying. We have made a grave error, Terang announced to the assembled delegates. We believed that human methods were primitive and that we could improve upon their work. Instead, we have learned that their methods were more sophisticated than we understood. Murmurs of anger and fear filled the chamber. Some delegates called for finding human colonies and demanding their return. Others suggested forcing the scattered human settlements to provide technical assistance. A few admitted that they had been wrong to dismiss human contributions. "What do you propose?" asked Ambassador Vex. Terran looked around the chamber at beings from across the galaxy, all united in their desperation. "We must contact humanity and ask for their help. We must admit our mistakes and hope they will forgive our arrogance." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in Council history, every member agreed on a course of action. They would send messages to the human colonies beyond the galactic rim, offering anything humanity wanted in exchange for their return. But as the delegates filed out of the chamber, many wondered if their offer would come too late. The galaxy was burning, and the only people who knew how to put out the fires were light years away, building a new civilization that no longer needed the Council's approval or recognition. The messages would be sent, but the Council's regret was already 5 years too late. Jake Morrison sat in his simple office on New Terra and watched the morning sun rise over the human city that stretched to the horizon. 7 years had passed since he had walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, and the world outside his window showed what humanity had accomplished in that time. Clean buildings rose into the sky, powered by fusion reactors that hummed with quiet efficiency. Gardens bloomed between the structures, filled with plants from 100 different worlds. Children played in parks, while their parents worked on projects that pushed the boundaries of science and engineering. His secretary Maria knocked on the door and entered carrying a datapad. "Jake, we have received a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. It came through the quantum relay network about an hour ago." Jake looked up from the reports he had been reading about the new colonies being established in the Andromeda Spiral. "From the Council? That's the first official communication we've received since we left." Maria handed him the pad with a serious expression. "You should see this yourself. It's from President Toran." Jake activated the holographic display, and the familiar figure of the Altarian leader appeared in his office. Toran looked older than Jake remembered. His purple skin had faded to a dull gray, and his movements seemed tired and defeated. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the authority Jake remembered from their last meeting. "Commander Morrison," Toran began, "I address you not as a representative of an inferior species, but as the leader of a people whose wisdom we failed to recognize. The Galactic Council formally acknowledges that we were wrong to dismiss humanity's contributions to our civilization." Jake leaned back in his chair as Toran continued. The alien leader described the disasters that had befallen Council space since humanity's departure. The Void Hunter invasion had consumed nearly half their territory. Disease and infrastructure failures had killed billions. Entire star systems had been abandoned as their life support systems collapsed without human maintenance. "We offer humanity full restoration to the Council, with voting rights exceeding those of any other member species," Toran said, his voice becoming more desperate. "We will grant humans autonomous control over any territories they wish to claim. We will share all our scientific knowledge and technological resources. We will give you anything you ask for if you will return and help us rebuild." The message continued for another 10 minutes as Toran listed the generous terms the Council was prepared to offer: research partnerships, military command positions, and control over galactic infrastructure projects. Everything humanity had once been denied was now being offered freely. When the recording ended, Jake sat quietly for several minutes. Through his window, he could see the human city continuing its daily routine. Scientists walking to laboratories where they studied the mysteries of the universe without alien oversight. Engineers designing ships that would carry humanity to distant galaxies. Farmers tending crops that would feed millions without asking. Permission from distant bureaucrats. Maria waited patiently for his response. She had been with Jake since the early days of the Exodus and understood the weight of the moment. "What do you think?" she finally asked. "I think they're scared," Jake replied. "Scared enough to offer us everything we wanted 7 years ago." Doctor. Lisa Carter entered the office as Jake was composing his response. She had become New Terra's Minister of Science and spent her days coordinating research projects that spanned dozens of worlds. Her team had made discoveries in the past 5 years that surpassed anything achieved during humanity's time in the Council. "I heard about the message," Lisa said as she took a seat across from Jake's desk. The quantum communication network lit up with chatter from our observation posts throughout Council space. "The situation there is worse than Toran admitted." Jake looked at his old friend and colleague. "How much worse?" "Complete civilizational collapse within 2 years," Lisa replied without hesitation. "Their infrastructure is failing faster than they can repair it. The Void Hunters have adapted to every strategy the Council military can devise. Disease outbreaks are spreading faster than their medical teams can respond. They're not just asking for our help, Jake. They're begging for survival." Through the office windows, Jake could see human children playing in a park filled with flowers from Earth, trees from Alpha Centauri, and grass from the Kepler colonies. Those children had never known the feeling of being dismissed or undervalued by alien bureaucrats. They had grown up free to explore their potential without asking permission from species who considered humans inferior. "Could we help them?" Jake asked. Lisa nodded slowly. "Our engineers could probably fix their infrastructure problems within a few months. Our doctors have developed treatments for diseases the Council has never encountered. Our military strategists have studied the Void Hunter invasion through long-range sensors and have some ideas about how to stop them." "But," Jake sensed there, was more to her answer. "But we're not the same people who left the galaxy 7 years ago," Lisa continued. "We've grown beyond what we were when we served the Council. Our children are being raised to think for themselves rather than seek approval from authority figures. Our scientists pursue knowledge for its own sake rather than to impress alien overseers. Our engineers build things because they want to solve problems, not because someone orders them to do it." Jake understood what she meant. Humanity had not just survived their exile from the galaxy. They had thrived in ways that would have been impossible under Council oversight. Free from the need to justify their methods to alien critics, human innovation had exploded in directions that no one had imagined. Dr. Nick Taylor walked past the office window, leading a group of young medical students toward the research hospital. He had developed cures for 17 different diseases in the past 3 years, using methods that would have horrified the Council's medical establishment. His students learned to trust their instincts as much as their instruments, and they were becoming the finest doctors humanity had ever produced. Captain Ben Harper landed, his exploration ship at the spaceport visible from Jake's office. He had just returned from surveying star systems in the Andromeda Galaxy, mapping routes for the next wave of human expansion. His crews reported finding wonders beyond imagination and challenges that would test human ingenuity for generations to come. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the human defense fleet from a space station orbiting New Terra. Her ships protected human space using strategies that combined traditional tactics with creative improvisation. Her officers were trained to think independently and adapt quickly to changing situations, skills that would have been discouraged in the rigid Council military. Jake activated his recording device and began composing humanity's response to the Galactic Council's plea. He spoke carefully, choosing words that conveyed respect without condescension. "President Turan, humanity receives your message with sadness for the suffering of Council citizens and appreciation for your acknowledgement of past errors. We understand the desperation that prompted your generous offer, and we honor the courage it took to admit your mistakes." Jake paused, looking out at the human city that represented everything his people had built in their years of exile. "However, we must respectfully decline your invitation to return to Council space. Humanity has found a different path among the stars, one that allows us to grow and explore without the constraints of galactic politics." He continued speaking for several more minutes, explaining that humans bore no anger toward the Council, and wished them well in their struggles. He offered to share certain medical and agricultural technologies that might help with their immediate crises, but made it clear that humanity would not return to serve alien masters. "We have learned that true civilization is not built on the approval of others, but on the freedom to pursue one's own destiny," Jake concluded. "Perhaps when the galaxy has learned to value wisdom over credentials and innovation over conformity, our peoples might meet again as equals among the stars." Jake sealed the message and handed it to Maria for transmission. As she left to send humanity's final response to the Galactic Council, Jake returned to his work, planning the next phase of human expansion into unexplored regions of space outside. His window, the sun set over New Terra, while human ships prepared for journeys to distant galaxies. The Council's regret had come too late, but for humanity, the greatest adventures still lay ahead in the vast darkness between the stars, where they would write their own destiny free from alien judgment. The future belonged to those brave enough to claim it, and humanity had chosen to build that future with their own hands.